All right, we've got a list of questions here about your music. Who were your influences on both the guitar and any singers?
Well, I'll do the guitar first. My theory was to visit people and don't stay too long. I never idolized anybody to the point where I just wanted to, play like them and be like them. There were guys that came close. It was tempting to do it. But for each kind of music, I would see that, my organized mind tends to break things down. And when I break them down, I would have to go through categories, And so the blues guys, I listened to guys that you first heard that were kind of contemporaries, which were, B.B. King, even though he'd been around quite a while, or the Three Kings, you could say that, Albert, B.B., and Freddie. And then through them, I went back further and I found Charlie Christian, who was a jazz guy that played, I think, in, Tommy Dorsey's band or something. For some of the first electric guitar players. And Kenny Burrell was a jazz player, Wes Montgomery, jazz player from Detroit, I think. And then when I found them, then I would go back even further to the blues guys. I stopped about 1920. Charlie Patton was a guy that played acoustic blues and stuff, along with Brownie McGee and guys like that. And they were influences as far as the very basics of blues, along with Jimmy Reed and guys like that. Then I discovered, more primitive, what you would call primitive rockabilly guys, or rock guys, which was James Burton, who played with Ricky Nelson and Elvis. Also Scotty Moore, which I found out was Elvis's guitar player after watching Elvis for 5 years and not knowing who was the name of the guitar player. It took a long time to find him. So then, I found Gene Vincent, who sang, but he fooled around with the guitar a little, I think. Or Cliff Gallup, I think that was a lead guitar that played with him, that played all those leads. That was interesting. And then through that venue of music, I found Eddie Cochran, and I found Carl Perkins, and those guys went back, not as far, but I listened to them, and I was influenced by a lot of the stuff they did. Some people say that was just white blues, but I think there was a little more to it than that. Then later the contemporaries came in, and I was fortunate to grow up in an era with great guitar players. Johnny Winter was a great guitar player, and slide and everything. Everybody knows that Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, all these English guys, Jeff Beck, listened to a lot of them. Then I was influenced by, of course, Jimi Hendrix and guys like that, because they kind of brought it all together, where they had R&B backgrounds and all that. And then I went to the R&B backgrounds, and then I listened to Steve Cropper, and I listened to Curtis Mayfield and Bobby Womack, and guys that played what you would call soul guitar, so that was the soul experience. And after I visited those guys, then, I went to the straight, rock guys that were more contemporary, if you could say Jeff Beck and guys, but they also had a lot of blues and rockabilly influences, and they were kind of listening to a lot of the same guys that I listened to, and then I found acoustic guys, guys like James Taylor and Paul Simon, who were excellent acoustic guitar players that were really never credited for that until you actually see them and watch the finger picking styles. And so later, I was influenced by them. And then, slide guitar playing, which I was always interested. The first guy that hit me was Booker White, who was B.B. King's cousin, which, one of the first boogie guys that played slide. There's still videos of him around now. And so I listened to him and several slide guitar players like that, Hound Dog Taylor, and eventually brought it into the area of, Duane Allman and Johnny Winter and those guys that kept up the slide thing pretty good. So when they add all that together, I think I tried to make myself well-rounded.
And how about singers?
Singing, well, it depends on what kind of singing. When I started, you thought about being a rock and roll sort of singer because that was what was popular. So I was only influenced by that to a certain degree because I didn't think it was fitting my voice what I was going to end up kind of doing, which is more of the black thing, which I still can't explain why. But I did listen to, rockabilly guys that sang, like I mentioned before, Eddie Cochran and Gene Vincent and those guys. And after that, and Carl Perkins, then I got into the older black thing, which was Otis Rush, Albert King, once again, Freddie King and those guys for their vocals, because to me, those guys could have been just vocalists singing and never ever played guitar and still have been really great because, they were able to do both. And I thought that was, pretty impressive. So I listened to all those guys. Later I tried to be, more of the rock thing that I was doing. I know this is worth noting that it developed later where I was playing in some different cover bands. I played in a lot of bands that people don't know I did. But anyway, when I did it, later, the whole thing, I guess Robert Plant and some of those guys might be, responsible for it, but they got into this thing, where it wasn't Little Richard type singing, which I would really dig in rock, but then they got into this thing where the high-pitched octaves were the whole thing, and pretty soon that was a trend, and just for the records, I used to call that the ball squeezers. It was like, you hit a high note, yeah, because somebody's squeezing you in the wrong place, and so I can't say that was an influence where I didn't want to go for me, because I had more of a, the older I got, the more baritone or wherever my voice became. So, then I had to go more to the Little Richard and, in Sun House type singing and, Solomon Burke and that kind of stuff. So, those were my influences.
So early on, you went to clubs in Detroit to see musicians for inspiration. Tell me about that.
Well, it started even earlier than what I told you before. So I'll go back and cover this because we're making a recording, right? And anyway, the first guys I saw weren't the black guys. That came a little later because, to tell you the truth, I grew up in an area where it was all white people, which I was never that happy about. I wanted to experience everybody that I heard on records and what they really sounded like, what their people were like. So, at first I listened to the white guys. So one of my first things to go listen to after hours were people that I knew or that were into country bands. And so my first experiences actually were going to see country bands because that was easier to get into. As being a white kid that had no way to get there, and people were scared to take you to black gigs, which I always thought was kind of ridiculous, but, that was just me. So I went to listen to a lot of country bands and local kind of guys that were doing rockabilly and stuff like that, and doing Ventures type instrumental music, which was big when I started. Then later, when we started playing little concerts and stuff, most of those things were geared toward kids. So the gigs were over around 10 or 11 o'clock. There was nothing to do, and you're all wired up. You played your one set, and you're gonna, so we would go to clubs that were stay open until 2. And I would go to see people that I jammed with there later, like Little Sonny, who was a singer and harmonica player right here from Detroit, and Mr. Bo, and some of these other guys, Bobo Jenkins, and you go and see them, and just, kind of hang around as long as you wanted to and be real casual about it. And, a lot of times I never even told anybody I was a musician. The secret key was telling people that later. I found out if you told people you were a musician, a lot of these guys were way different than they are today. They wanted you to come up and jam right now because they were curious, like, what would you be doing in a place like this? You're a musician? Well, come on up and jam with us. So that's how a lot of it started.
Okay, how did you develop your singing style? You have a unique style.
Well, I developed it 3 different ways because my voice changed and I was fooling around. When we were kids, we used to, how are we going to get the true soul and all this stuff? And a lot of musicians, you could talk to a lot of famous guys and kind of all, the common thread runs through there, same thing. We ended up like wanting to sort of be like certain guys, but, develop a certain voice. And at that time, I had sort of a high tenor voice. So then I ended up singing harmony with a lot of guys where there was another baritone or powerful lead singer, and I would just sing the higher harmony parts to that because that was what was required to do a lot of the songs that were popular in the 60s when I started, background vocals and stuff. As my voice changed and I tried to sing a few other songs, I remember, my one friend John, when I was playing with him, he used to make me do one song, and I can, never forget that he made me do it as one of the first leads that I sang. I mean, I used to sing, stuff by Chuck Berry and stuff, obviously, but he used to want me to sing "Can I Get a Witness?" And he would love every time, Mark's going to sing "Can I Get a Witness?" It's like, okay, and to me, I just did it okay, but, people thought this is great because he's doing "Can I Get a Witness?" And, he sounds pretty good to where, a Motown guy might sound. was flattering, so I felt I should go more in that direction vocally. And later, when I sang more, and the more that I sang, it got easier. And then also something worth noting is in the mid-70s, I quit smoking cigarettes. I only smoked for 10 years. But as soon as I quit smoking for a couple months, I noticed it changed my voice. And my voice all of a sudden had a higher and lower range it didn't have before. And so once I did that, then I realized there was other songs I could easily do and attempt doing in a band that I couldn't do before. But eventually it became more of a baritone thing, and then the blues thing was just so natural that after I tried everything else, singing and guitar playing, that's where I went with it. Because I thought it was where I was the strongest.
So you said the first song that you wrote all by yourself was Going Back Down in the Bottle. So what influenced the song?
Well, what influenced the song as far as the content of the song was my parents. People think that is a song, oh man, Mark has all these personal experience songs and he must have had a drinking problem at some point and all this. No, it was because I wrote it for my parents, but the real reason I wrote that song is because my wife was getting fed up with me, and I was living in the desert of California with her. This is my second wife, and it just ended up to be, and rightly so, and there was a record company, a big one, which I won't have to name, that wanted songs, my more original songs. I think they wanted ones that weren't copywritten, that might have been what hurt me. In the end, I had a published and copywritten, before I wrote the song. So I wrote that for other artists. I didn't write it for myself. I would just send it to the company hoping somebody wanted to record it, and they were kind of hot on doing it. But they just sent me back something saying, "No, our artists have had too many drinking problems. No, you got to write something else. We can't do." So then I was, I got thrown out of the house anyways because it didn't work, and I had the song. So when I came back to Detroit after the second divorce, then it was at least an original song. People kept telling me it sounded like a B.B. King song, and Thrill Is Gone or something, but I didn't base it on that. I don't base my stuff on anything like that. It just comes out.
You have like a jazzy guitar solo at the end that you said honors a local guitar player, and who was that?
Wes Montgomery, and I just thought that fit. I know guys that have made total styles out of Wes Montgomery. I mean, even the guy who escapes me right now, but he was another influence I forgot on guitar. The guy that played in James Brown's band, who taught me how to do all that funky stuff. And he used to do stuff like that and make kind of a style out of it at times, where for me, it was in the back of my mind that I liked Wes Montgomery, and I had a few records by him. And it occurred to me that if I was going to play the song I wrote, I could do anything I wanted in it, obviously. So I tried regular solos, and I do a regular, say, blues solo in it, sort of. And then at the end, I thought it was good to have more guitar, but I didn't want to repeat the same type solo I had. So it just came out one day as the groove was going on, playing with the band, that I should try one of those double string octave type Wes Montgomery jazz type solos, and it seemed to work in there, so I kept it.
And how do you get the sound? You said double octaves.
Well, that you could do with your fingers, because before, I mostly, in the early part of my life, I didn't try to play with my fingers. I wasn't sure even how to do it. I used to envy guys that could do it, especially guys that could do it really fast and play without a pick and get all these different octave type sounds out of their guitar that are not going to sound the same if you're doing it with a flat pick. So I came up with that tone just mainly from listening to kind of to jazz guys and trying to fit it in with the tone that I already had.
Your woman songs, are they real life? For example, that old Fast Blue Train or My Baby Is Sweeter?
Well, My Baby's Sweeter, I didn't write it, but Fast Old Blues Train, yeah, okay, I wrote that, but, I guess, I don't know. Ask me it again, and I'll try to be more specific if you just ask it to me again.
The woman songs, all the songs that you sing about women.
Well, they were composites. And first of all, I never really wrote anything very much about one particular person. And people think, you know, especially if you were with a person and had a relationship with them, whether it's romantic or not, and you wrote that about me. And a lot of that's not really true. Maybe a little bit of it, but only for the inspiration part of it, or if I thought it would fit in the song for the meter of it or something. But most of these things that I've ever written are just composites of people that I did know or just things I heard.
So who really owned the purple panties?
Nobody. That was just I made that up because somebody, I must have seen it on TV or something, that somebody was giving their girlfriend a pair of you know how people used to give lingeries for Christmas. And there was one that looked so stupid. You know, it was like, I think it was the whole set. I think it was a bra and the panties that were, you know, purple with white polka dots. And I thought they were doing it as some kind of a joke maybe, because that's what it looked like. You know, I don't know any woman that really want to wear that, although there are some that will look great in anything. But, you know, so I just put that in the memory bank and don't even remember where I got it, but it was just something I thought would fit in if I did the expanded version of that song, which was kind of good when you were playing in long bars late at night, and there was a lot of, you know, people, only adult audiences, and so I would shorten it down and not do that version of it, you know, if you're playing for the average person, but some people got a big kick out of it.
So what influences did you have for the song Come from the Motor City?
Well, to tell you the truth about that, I saw, you know, and I could say this because I was born there, you know, and grew up in Motor City, basically spent a lot of time in the city, even after I got older. And I had my reservations about how great it was. All I kept hearing from everybody that lived around here is, oh man, don't mess with Motor City. We're from Detroit. All that's great, all that's true. But nobody ever said anything about the downside of it. Nobody wrote anything about, you know, some of the downsides of it. Now it's not politically correct. I don't even do it as much now. But to me, it was just a more realistic way of coming up with some of the things that maybe weren't quite so great, that were kind of tongue-in-cheek. That's how I really was intended it to be.
Your song Trixie Takes a Walk is one of my favorites. It's an instrumental song. Tell me about it.
Well, I didn't have a title for it. It was an instrumental that I used to fool around with. It, to be honest with you, it was something I fooled around with on the acoustic guitar to tune the guitar. You know, you just mess around with something. You go through a little thing where you're tuning a guitar. You got new strings or something. You want to break them in a little bit. Then you'll play, you know, a few of those type riffs. So I decided to make a little song out of it that I could do on breaks, or I could use it for something. And my best friend Tom, who's gone now, his mother had a dog named Trixie. And everything was about, I'm going to take Trixie for a walk. I'm going to take Trixie outside. And then here comes Trixie. And, you know, people get obsessive about their pets. And she would talk about this Trixie all the time. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to call this Trixie Takes a Walk because I don't have any title for it. So that's how it became Trixie.
So why are there no lyrics?
There's no lyrics because it was an instrumental song already written. And all I needed to do was write a title for it, and I decided to keep it as an instrumental because I don't have very many instrumentals, maybe only 2 or 3.
What are the other ones?
Well, I don't do this now because of politically correct, but I had something was called the Falcon Shuffle, because Falcon was a nickname that somebody told me, and then, well, you can't say that now, maybe, and, you know, it's my name on my publishing company too, so I'm still thinking about that one, but I'm going to change it. But the Falcon Shuffle was just another instrumental that was like a Freddie King type thing, which you guys maybe never really heard. And I used to do that. And then I didn't have the same situation as it was with Trixie Takes a Walk. I didn't have a title for it. I got, what do you call it? Well, it's a shuffle. Okay, the Falcon Shuffle. I also had the Falcon Boogie, which is on one of the earlier tapes that I'm giving you. I think you probably hear that somewhere down the line too.
One Divorced Man for Sale. Who inspired that song?
My second wife, definitely. Although it wasn't just totally about her. The intro was about a buddy of mine that used to have different women all the time, and then he'd almost put a sign out, you know, to get the new one. To take, then he'd have shoes that the old one left in there because she moved out, and then she'd want to give him, you know, the new one. Hey, what do you like? Do you like these shoes? And I think he was really cool giving him shoes, and all he was doing was just trying to, you know, score a new woman and just act like he's giving him something that he already had anyway. That a lot of guys would have just thrown out because it belonged to, you know, the ex before. So I thought, well, that sounds like a good intro. Now all I got to do is come up with something that fits into it, and the divorce thing, you know, was a natural fit. So, you know, I wrote "Divorce Man for Sale" because I thought, well, hey, that's something that, you know, a lot of people can relate to, and I needed a song that was my own blues song that was slow, other than "Back Down the Bottle." I didn't have anything like that, so I basically changed, you know, some of the old blues songs that were like "Blues with a Feeling" and some of those type of songs, and then just wrote a few different changes to it on the guitar so it wouldn't be exactly like that, and then wrote my own words to fit the music.
Why did you start playing and writing songs for the slide guitar?
Well, how that started was my first wife, and I reminded her this, and she even remembered it. When we were together many moons ago, I used to sit and fool around with different tunings on the guitar just to fool around with them. And open E tuning, which any guitar player knows is probably the easiest one. You only have to move a few positions on your strings or tuning keys in order to get that, and then you have an open tuning that you can use slide on. I didn't have a slide, so she had a lipstick tube, which is what I used. I put a lipstick tube on my finger and used to sit on the edge of the bed. And she'd be drinking a cup of coffee or something, and I'd be doing this with the slide, you know. And I said, "You remember me sitting on the edge of the bed?" She goes, "Yeah, well, that's how I came up with playing slide, because I didn't learn it. I'd heard it from other guys like Book of White and stuff, but I didn't listen to it to try to make a style out of it or try to play it from what I heard from somebody else." Then later, when I got more into it and it became more of a part of my life or repertoire, whatever you want to say, I made up my own tuning that I thought would work. And the reason I made up my own tuning about it was so that it would fit in with the key that I wanted to sing the stuff in.
So what tuning is that? Because that's the next question. Do you have unique guitar tunings? Are there other ones besides that?
No, I played regular Spanish guitar tuning, everything other than on the open on the slide. And what I did was, from fooling around, not from any other person, so I could show that maybe later when I actually show it, but doing it. But anyway, it's basically an A chord, open, which is your A string is open string. Then your other strings are the lower position of an A chord of the guitar on the first fret. And then the open strings are the B and high E. So I tuned that to open A. And then the part that made it more unique is like, okay, most guys, if they did that, they would keep the lower string E because it does harmonize. But then I thought, well, I'm going to use this maybe by myself. I don't know. I want to get this drone thing. I kind of like the stuff John Lee Hooker used to do. So one day I was fooling around with it, and I took the low E string and I tuned it down an octave. So that's also an A. So now I have something that resonates that I can work off of the other strings and resonate on that low A, which, you know, and you can also move that up to give you like a bass accompaniment while you're doing your regular stuff. And what also makes it a little more unique for me is because I learned by myself, I put the slide on my index finger. Most guys wear it on their fourth finger or on their pinky, you know, and I decided to do it on my index finger, mainly because I could bar the chords just like you bar on a regular guitar and then work your other fingers off of that, which made a whole lot of sense. But nobody does it, I don't think, except me, about that tuning and have the slide on their index finger, which also allows me to move it over and go all the way up the neck, and you could cover a couple, 3 octaves doing that.
Wow. Why don't you use pedals?
Well, blues guys a lot of times don't, but I mean, there was times when I tried them. There was a thing called the phase shifter in the 60s that came out, and that was like a sort of tremolo unit that was stranger that I think, we were talking earlier about Robin Trower. I think that he used a phase shifter to get some of that wavering type tone. I tried that and I thought, well, no, that's making me sound like a certain guy, kind of more like these other guys that use that. And then the more I got into the effects, the more I realized that if you use them a lot, you'll have to depend on them you can't not use them. You go out and play with these effects, and that's what people expect you to sound like. And if you don't, you go, well, something sounds funny and naked, like it's not right. It's like you forgot something, or I've seen that happen with other people. So I did try a wah-wah pedal for a while, which was kind of cool. Which I did think about using on some of the slower stuff, which maybe if I really think about it, it might be worth a try again here and there. But just having the reverb and doing everything, I wanted the focus to be on my tone through my fingers and what the tone was like on the guitar and the amp, and just leave it at that.
How do you choose what songs to play that aren't your own?
Well, I try to choose ones that not everybody does, although I chose a couple of them that people did because people couldn't judge you by what you were doing. To be honest about it, for a long time I played, and they weren't really hip on the original song idea in a blues band. I mean, people, the audiences, and even the people that were hiring you, they wanted to, so for a long time I didn't tell people that I wrote the songs I wrote. They thought it was some old blues song they never heard before, and I just let them keep thinking it. But it's hard to say. The songs that I didn't write, most of it I try to fit in with the guys I'm playing with, depending on the instrumentation you have in the band. If you have sax and you're going towards something that'll complement that, or a harmonica, you got to do something more that maybe complement that, because there are different things that complement each other. Some of them kind of get in the way, or they don't work as well. So that's how I decided that.
I was listening to a Blue Goose 2001 recording of you, and I don't recognize the song One Step at a Time. Is that yours?
No. I listened to a Johnny Winter record one time, and I think he might have had James Cotton or somebody playing on it, harmonica. And so at the time I started doing that, once again, we had a harmonica player in the band. So it was something that went well with the harmonica, and it was something easy that you could learn, and I didn't have to have a lot of rehearsal with the band, because it's all, simple, normal 1-4-5 changes that you're going to do in that. And I thought the voice fit well in the words, because people kept telling me, we like the way you're doing that. So I kept it.
And I was listening to the song TV Mama, and it sounds a lot like Dallas. Tell me about that.
Those two, again, were Johnny Winter songs, and the reason I was picking those, that type, is because I had to have something a little bit more modern. I suppose if I wanted to be a guy that did more research, and maybe I got an old book of white recordings and I found them, and I'm going to listen to stuff that he did that nobody, heard, like, look, it's more rolling from side to side and all that, which is cool, but you've heard it before. So these other words were a little different. And so those were meant for the slide, and you can't find too many guys that play slide or do original songs doing it, especially. So you have to, improvise, and I thought those fit my style.
So were your fans into yelling Freebird or other songs that they wanted to hear? What's the history of that for you?
Well, the history of it depends on what era you're playing. I think we were talking earlier about that Blues Brothers thing. We had a blues band starting up at that time when the Blues Brothers movie came out. Up until then, people were just telling you, hey, play a John Lee Hooker or B.B. King, or they'd yell out stuff that they thought was blues that they'd heard before. Then they started with yelling this Blues Brothers stuff, which was ridiculous to me, because in the movie they weren't really doing that much blues. They're doing a lot of R&B and stuff like this. So you don't want to stop your set and say, listen, man, those guys were only playing, But I guess if you played Sweet Home Chicago, they think it was Blues Brothers, even though that song had been done 5,000 times before anybody ever saw that movie. I think the movie was made in 1980. Blues like that goes a lot further back. And people yelling Freebird and stuff out like that, a lot of times you would be in situations where people were really stoned, let's face it, drugs, drinking, whatever mixture of it, and they would just yell out whatever the first thing came into their head that they thought. And then they thought if you do this and they yell out enough, that you'd satisfy their itch for whatever it is they're thinking about, and you'd end up, the next song, they must be requesting it, so you would do that song, and then they'd, kind of be happy, which, we never, fell into.
So you never played Freebird?
No.
Okay, did you jam with other well-known Detroit musicians in your career?
Yeah. a lot of it was at parties though. They weren't necessarily on stage, because when you go back into when I first started, like I mentioned earlier, everybody did one set, and all the bands like were, because of the format that was laid down the law by the big guys, which were the Beatles and the Stones and all that, and the stuff that was on television, you were expected to do way shorter songs without any jamming or changing anything in them, other than the way the original thing was done on record, and you were expected to do that. So what would end up happening is you had four bands on a gig at night, and sometimes, I hate to say this, but it was almost like the equipment change between what each band was using was longer in between bands than what the bands actually played, because you did all those songs. If you did like 3 or 4 minute songs, if you did 12 of those, it's not very long. So the gigs would end. They were geared for young people anyway, and they would end like in 11 or 12 o'clock. Then you'd be wired. There'd be nothing to do. So that's how we started going over. Well, there's a club where this blues guy's playing, or this jazz guy's playing, or country, whatever it was, and it was something for us to do. Especially once we got old enough where we were of age to go there and sit in with people. And we weren't necessarily meaning to sit in, but we'd have our guitars with us, because we just played these other gigs. And we'd go there, with Little Sonny and some of these people that were blues guys, and then they'd find out you were musicians. Oh man, that guitar yours? Well, yeah, I guess there's nobody else here. And they, come on up, man, sit in with us. You wouldn't expect that, but you weren't there just to hear them. But since a lot of these guys that were playing, their things were 4 or 5 hours long in those days, the sets they were playing was just the opposite of ours. Ours was really short and theirs was really long. They're playing all night. So it kind of broke it up for them too, especially if they could rest in between and let you play something, they get a big kick out of it, and sometimes the audience did too. So we started doing that just to, have some place to go and sort of party where there was music. As far as the other Detroit musicians, a lot of that was of guys that were playing the same situation as us. They were done, and a lot of them had a band house. And for a while in the late 60s, there were a lot of band houses where these guys lived with their girlfriends, and whoever showed up and ran around there and acted crazy and stuff like this, which is a whole nother story. But they would have their equipment there. So we would go over there and end up jamming with guys, not on stage with them, because everybody had their own act, and they didn't seem to like guys playing on stage with them. Like the black guys and those blues guys did, but for some reason the rock guys, they thought you're tramping on their show. So but at a party, everybody got bored that was a musician, and you're standing around talking to girls and stuff for about an hour, and then it sort of got old. Like, well, either we're gonna go to another party, or well, there's all this equipment over here. Well, let's jam. And so guys from these local bands would get together and play things that I wish they would have had recordings of them, because some of them were pretty interesting. I think some of them were really good. You wouldn't mind hearing now.
So tell me about going to gigs and observing equipment set up and breakdown.
That was something I did on my own, because Duncan brought it up too about tone. And I was interested in how these guys were gonna get what tone, and how the setup was gonna be to produce that type of sound and that type of tone, especially when you're going to gigs that were fairly big. It wasn't like now where you might go to a gig where it's 50 or 100 people. Sometimes at these things, like the Grandy ballrooms, they did 2,000 people. And these gigs, there was a lot of demand, a lot of people. So how are you going to sound good if you just showed up from another town? You don't know what the audience is. You don't know about the venue, what it sounds like, what the PA sounds like. So I decided, if I'm going to sound good, I want to see every guy that I think I might admire, because that's why I'm going to see them, because they're going to play there that night. And I would go there like 2 hours early. And then I'd watch the roadies or whoever it is and kind of get to be friendly with them and just say, oh, you set up? Oh, yeah. And then they didn't mind you standing there like right on the stage, even on the wings, or right in front, because people weren't all there yet. And I used to get a kick out of watching how everything was set up, the amps, the speakers, if there was monitors in the early days, that was the early thing being developed, that you would be able to go there and figure out how they were gonna get the tone they were gonna get when they started playing. and then you would see him play, and then I would watch how all that went down. And then at the end of it, a lot of people would leave, and I would stand up there again and go to the front of the stage and watch everything break down and see what lasted. It was also informative as far as equipment, because you knew what kind of equipment could last and sound good with tone, and what things lost their tone or blew up or didn't work at all after a while. And you'd see what happened to this after the show and how it got where it got, and you know, that really helped me later on.
Okay, that's it. Okay, I'm calling this the speed round. Just give me a one-word answer as quickly as you can. Cat or dog?
Cat.
Desert or rainforest?
Desert.
Paper or plastic?
Plastic.
Acoustic or electric?
Electric.
Electric or slide?
Electric.
Lake or ocean?
Ocean.
Country or city?
City.
Prince or Stevie Wonder?
Stevie Wonder.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Blonde or brunette?
Brunette.
Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Rolling Stones.
Corn or flour tortillas?
Corn.
Ketchup or mustard?
Mustard.
Guitar strings, steel or nylon?
Steel.
NASCAR or Indy?
NASCAR.
Mad Magazine or Scientific American?
Mad Magazine.
Razor or gun?
Razor.
Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Cans or bottles?
Cans.
Chicago or Memphis?
Memphis.
Charcoal or propane?
Charcoal.
Speedboat or sailboat?
Sailboat.
Bob Dylan or John Prine?
Bob Dylan.
Olympic skating or Olympic gymnastics?
Olympic gymnastics.
Elevator or stairs?
Elevator.
60s or 70s?
60s.
Pen or pencil?
Pen.
Boxers or briefs?
Briefs.
3/4 or 4/4 time?
4/4.
Ginger or Marianne?
Ginger.
What's your favorite fruit?
Cherry.
Favorite color?
Red.
Besides yourself, your favorite artist?
Pass.
Favorite alcoholic beverage?
Tequila.
Favorite movie?
Ben-Hur.
This last one is for Bluesman. Favorite bondage knot?
Slip. This is going to be the last segment of this. I decided to do it with a guitar demo for no other reason than people ask me a lot of times how I came up with some of these guitar things and songs and things. So I decided to do two different things. One would be this guitar, the other one would be the slide guitar. Back down the bottom, people ask me how I wrote it and how I put different things into it. And I'll go by step without trying to go into too much detail. See that right there was soul guitar. Basically, you know, inspired by maybe Steve Cropper, you know, or those type of guys, Curtis Mayfield, you know. So I decided it would be that kind of a blues song, and then you could add standard blues type stuff in it. At the end of the verse. So that's that part of it. Then at the end, I decided what I'm going to do was something different other than the regular blues solo, because I already did it in the middle of the song. So I guess towards the end of the song, you know, the jazz type stuff, or Wes Montgomery, what we're going to say, popped into my mind and it would go with it. That type of thing. And then in order to follow it through, if you go up in the high register, I discovered this, where you can use your last finger, which in this case is your fourth finger, and use it where there's air, where there's no frets. Which obviously works better when you're playing with a band, because you can build it up. sounds kind of funky here, but as you turn it up with a band, those notes will come out better. So that was a little demo on that, and then I'm going to move to the slide in just about 5 seconds. I decided to include this. I should have done it before, but people always ask me about playing the slide on this finger, which I don't know if anybody else does. I said I spoke earlier, I think, about the fact that I never learned from anyone else. I saw other guys who wear it on their small pinky finger. I've seen people wearing a middle finger, but on the index finger, I'm not sure, and I made it up myself being self-taught. So what I'm going to demonstrate here is why I did that. And the reason is, you know, if a guitar player is going to play his chord, which I'm not going to try to emulate exactly here, is a bar chord. It's an open chord. Well, this guitar is already tuned open, right? So I figured the easiest way to do it would be to put the slide on your index finger and then work your fingers off of that the same as you would if you were playing on a regular Spanish tuned guitar, which is okay, that shows this. If you add your fingers, other fingers to it and work off of it, made sense to me. That's it. Okay, this is coming towards the end of this video, so I'm going to say my goodbyes kind of now. After I do this, this will be it, I think, till we make part 2 or whatever it's going to be, if there ever is. So, the last guitar demo I'm doing on the slide guitar here, and I'll show you how I came up with it because it's a little different. People keep asking me about it enough, so I thought I should include it in here. When I started playing slide, of course, it was like a lot of other people. You're playing it in standard tuning, and I was never a fan of that because I like the drone idea. And I guess I should say right here, we were talking about guitar influences and all that. There was one guy that influenced me a lot, but he wasn't a guitar player. And I'll show you how it works into this. Rabbi Shankar. I went to see him one time when I was in Madison, Wisconsin. It was a full place, but outside, you know, and you could walk pretty much right up to it. So I stood there and watched, and what I liked was the drone. Now he might you know, in the kind of the minor scale. So I started thinking, well, I could do that with blues, and it'd be interesting, especially if you had to play anything by yourself, which I never thought of at the time, but it kind of ended up it was a good idea. So the first thing I did was not use that, you know. I would just do, and I like to play in the key of A, because I sing in the key of A a lot. So I decided to come up with my own tuning. You know, my first wife said she remembers me sitting on the edge of the bed figuring this stuff out while she was reading a book or something. And I would try to figure out different tunings. You know, a lot of these guys have standard G tunings, open G, they have open E, they have open D tuning, there's a bunch of them. And I thought, well, I don't know if anybody has open A tuning, to tune an open A chord on a standard tuning of guitar, and that's this. But I figured, well, I could use the low E and keep it on the E, and it would harmonize, but it wouldn't be as cool as dropping it down. So I experimented by dropping it down to where it's like a bass, it's an octave down, right? So, and then I came up with the idea of a which is standard blues. So then I thought, well, the drone could come in there because boogies and all those kind of things that people kind of like. There's a drone there. So I decided to experiment, and I dropped the A string down, like I said, an octave. I decided, okay, that's pretty full sound, that's pretty cool. And I didn't even use any slide. I just droned. So then I decided to add that to it. See where the rabbi shaker comes in there? But nobody thinks of that but me, and I forgot all about it when you play it. And another trick I'll let out in the bag now, isn't much, really, but I bought this particular guitar, not just because it was cheap, but probably it was cheap on purpose because they had a little bit of a funkier tone to it, which is kind of cool with you doing the old slide stuff that tends to be kind of Delta, or Piedmont is I guess the correct term that they call it. But I like this one because it had the fat pickup. It is a normal humbucking size on the rear, but it had what they call a New York humbucker pickup on the front, which is small. And the thing about that is, you can get the slide to go up there without rattling against the pickup. Anyways, I was experimenting with that. I decided, well, what happens if you take it all the way? I turn the slide over. And that's about as high as you can do it on that. But for effect, it's kind of cool. And then, you know, all you're doing is moving your hand up to the last screw, really, the pickup adjustment screw on the last pickup. And people think you're doing something incredibly great, and all you're really doing is just turning the slide over because you can't put your hand against the guitar. You could, but it's easier to do it this way. And just for effect, to use it that way. So in the end, you got something like That's it. I just wanted to slow it down to show you what you can do with something if you use your imagination. But thanks everybody for watching this, and hope you get something out of it, and you know, have a good time with life. That's what I'm trying to do harder every year. So long.